Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, how to get 30, how to get 20, 20, 20, how to get 20, 20, how to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by La Quinta by Wyndham. Your work can take you all over the place, like Texas. You've never been, but it's going to be great because you're staying at La Quinta by Wyndham. Their free Bright Side breakfast will give you energy for the day ahead. And after, you can unwind using their free high-speed Wi-Fi. Tonight, La Quinta. Tomorrow, you shine. Book your stay today at lq.com.
So, Molly, you're a sports investigations reporter, but I imagine you're also a sports fan. When you tune into the Olympics coverage over the next 2 weeks, what are you most excited to see?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think the obvious answer is Simone Biles.
I think they're glad to be here watching. Here is Simone Biles.
Molly Henseley Clancy writes about sports for the Washington Post. And right now, she's writing about gymnastics, which had its Olympic qualifiers over the weekend. The women's team final happens today.
She looks assertive, Sam, aggressive, which is saying something on a 4-inch wide balance beam, but she just looks like she's on a mission early here.
Yeah, coaches always... You know, I actually wasn't a gymnastics fan until I started doing this story, and I've just become so fascinated with it. I feel like I've gained this understanding of how incredibly difficult this sport is.
Hello. Glad to see you, Simone Biles.
Got to be a high number, right? It is 14-7-3-3.
A lot of the media coverage of USA Gymnastics has highlighted the triumphant and inspiring return of Simone Biles. And she has a story, of course. She pulled out of a lot of her events back in Tokyo in 2021, prioritizing her mental health.
I've just never felt like this going into a competition before, and I tried to go out here and have fun, and warm up in the back went a little bit better, but then once I came out here, I was like, no, mental is not there, so I just need to let the girls do it and focus on myself.
There was so much pressure on her. It felt like it could have been a turning point for protecting the emotional well-being of Olympic gymnasts. Was it?
No.
8 years ago, gymnastics was at a crossroads when former team doctor Larry Nassar was charged with rampant sexual abuse. His victims blamed him, but they also blamed the sport and a toxic culture that persisted for decades. The sport's governing body, USA Gymnastics, vowed to make a change. Molly says when she began her reporting, she thought they actually had.
I think everyone wants to believe that this sport is better. I did too before I started looking into this, but I kept talking to these gymnasts who said, the first gymnast I talked to actually about college said, yeah, I had a coach bite me when I was a kid. And I was like, what? That's absurd. That's not okay. And so I looked this coach up that she talked about, still coaching, and I started looking up coach after coach after coach who had been accused of abuse, and over and over again, they're all still coaching.
Molly interviewed dozens of gymnasts in the course of her reporting. She found that allegations of emotional and physical abuse against top coaches are still mostly met with inaction. An independent oversight organization designed to investigate misconduct across all Olympic sports has failed to ban a single gymnastic coach solely for physical or emotional abuse.
It's one thing for a coach to say, this is how it used to be, like this is the old environment, but I'm changing my practices. I'm going to do things differently now. And there are some coaches who have said that, but there's a lot of coaches who have not acknowledged that they were part of the problem and have not said anything about changing.
Today on the show, USA Gymnastics promised a reckoning. Did it deliver? I'm Mary C. Curtis, in for Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
This show is brought to you by Public. If you are looking for simple yet sophisticated investing, Public.com says click on over and check them out. From stocks to options, bonds to crypto, it is all there. You can even earn an industry-leading 5.1% APY on your cash. Public is trusted by millions of investors, and NerdWallet just gave Public 4.6 stars and calls it an impressive experience. Sign up in 2 minutes at Public.com. All your investing in one place. This is a paid advertisement for Public Investing, 5.1% APY as of June 17th, 2024, and is subject to change. NerdWallet overall rating 4.6 out of 5 as of May 2024. Full disclosures in the podcast description. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies, all lined up and ready to compare, so it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at Progressive.com to join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
So, Molly, I'd like you to take a look back at when the American gymnastics program really started becoming a powerhouse in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah, I think that everyone will tell you this goes back to the Karolis, to Bella and Marta Karolyi, who had coached Nadia Comaneci in the Soviet Union. And I think that when they came over to the United States, they brought this culture with them. And the culture was about control. It was about controlling gymnasts. The easiest gymnasts to control are very, very young. You can control their bodies. You can control their emotions. You can basically make it so they won't talk back to you and they won't say no. And so that's what I really think the culture was. And I think that it was very successful quite quickly. So it got to a point where people, other coaches were starting to emulate this. And I think all across the sport, it created this culture where the idea was you peak at 15 or 16 years old. And I think we're starting to see now that physically that's not necessarily the case. So it makes you wonder, was what they were looking for not necessarily about physical, abilities. It was about basically who are you able to control.
And I remember back then, there wasn't much talk or concern for their health and safety. So there was a general feeling that if they were injured, you either push through it or you could be replaced. What impact did that environment have on these elite gymnasts who came up under these coaches?
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to overestimate how profoundly it affected how they saw themselves, how they saw their own bodies. They felt like their pain didn't matter. The most important thing was winning. And, that included emotional pain, but physical pain as well. They felt afraid to voice their needs, their wants. They also didn't trust their own instincts. And I think this came into play a lot with the Nasser scandal, because if you said, I don't think I can stick this landing, I'm scared, you would be immediately shut down. You were never allowed to doubt or to take control based on your own instincts and fears. And I think that, with Larry Nasser, you would hear gymnasts say, I felt something was wrong, but I didn't know how to articulate that. I didn't know who to go to. And I didn't trust my own instincts that there was something wrong with this, because the coaches were telling me, it's okay. He's the best. You have to do this,
Well, you bring up Larry Nasser and that abuse scandal in 2016 that really upended the sport. Can you just remind our listeners, Molly, of what happened?
Yeah, so Larry Nasser was the doctor for the U.S. national team. He also worked in gymnastics clubs. He also worked for the University of Michigan. But he was sexually abusing gymnasts by the hundreds for decades. And it turned out that gymnasts had recognized something was wrong. Some of them had been trying to raise alarms about him, to tell adults about him. And over again, no one did anything to stop him. And in fact, in most cases, gymnasts weren't believed that something was wrong. So, he eventually was, thanks to, great investigative journalism and some really brave women, he was caught, he was sentenced. His sentencing hearing, where dozens, I believe, of gymnasts, maybe more than 100, were able to come forward and talk about what he'd done to them, that was a real turning point for the sport as well, because it was kind of the first moment where people were empowered to speak, women were empowered to speak up and describe what their lives had been like and what they'd gone through.
Larry, you do realize now that we, this group of women you so heartlessly abused over such a long period of time, are now a force, and you are nothing.
Just how did that moment impact USA Gymnastics as a governing body? I know that they were facing lawsuits and even bankruptcy back then.
Yeah, so there was a house cleaning in the highest levels of USA Gymnastics. Steve Penny, the CEO, faced criminal charges at one point for, I think, hindering an FBI investigation. They all left, basically, as they should have, because it turned out that so many of them had been culpable in this in one way or another. So I think you did see this huge kind of profound sea change at USA Gymnastics. I also, there was a report auditing all of their practices of, how you report or handle reports of sexual assault and abuse. And they made a lot of changes there.
In 2021, USA Gymnastics did agree to pay a $380 million settlement to the victims of Larry Nassar. They also agreed to assign a board seat, which was selected by a committee of survivors of Nassar's abuse. To the outside observer, it might seem like these settlements put an end to this really dark era for USA Gymnastics. How have they recovered in the last 5 years, and what changes have been made?
So I think that in a lot of ways they have recovered, and I think some of the evidence that you see is athletes that are feeling, comfortable returning to the sport after having been abused. I've talked to Tasha Schweikert-Moser, who sits on the board in that seat for Nassar survivors, and she, is a lawyer. She has been very thorough and is looking over this and says there's a lot of changes that have been made. I think there are processes for reporting sexual assault. There were some problems, I think, that Simone Biles has talked about leading up to the 2020 Olympics with the amount of pressure that was being put onto her and kind of the space that was being made for her to, be a survivor of sexual abuse and work through these issues. And she wasn't being given that. That being said, I think the fact that she was able to say, no, I can't do this safely, I'm pulling out of the competition, I do think that is a testament to some changes that have been made, it being a different space and a different culture, because I think that would have been kind of impossible for a 15 or 16-year-old gymnast to have done in the Caroli era, I think.
Oh, definitely. I remember them limping around competing.
Yeah. Yeah. And we took it as a sign that they were so strong and brave and we should be pushing them to do this.
At that time, there was also the establishment of the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, and that was an independent body created by Congress. What was that created to do?
So the idea behind Safe Sport is that anytime anyone within the Olympic movement, so in a sport that's overseen by one of these governing bodies, that includes USA Basketball, USA Soccer, anytime there is any whiff of a report or concern of sexual abuse, you need to take it to the U.S. Center for Safe Sport. And so you have this outside body that is doing the investigation, presumably looking into these allegations, and then has the ability to ban coaches from participating or suspend them or, limit their contact with athletes. So it's a great idea. They also, they don't automatically have the jurisdiction over emotional and physical abuse, but they can take on those cases and investigate them. And if they choose to do that, then governing bodies like USA Gymnastics need to step back and let Safe Sport handle it until there's a conclusion reached.
Is American gymnastics an environment that's free of abuse now?
No, absolutely not.
After the break, the abuse that remains.
This episode is brought to you by SAP. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI will not help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia, or identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, or automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations. So you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI. This episode is brought to you by SAP. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI will not help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia, or identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, or automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations. So you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
Your investigation was focused on gymnasts who trained under two particular coaches. Who are they?
Yeah, so when I started looking into elite gymnastics, I talked to dozens of athletes. You know, these two coaches kept coming back. Their names are Arthur Akopian and Galina Marinova. They co-own this gym in California called All Olympia Gymnastics Center, AOGC. They, have coached some very famous gymnasts. Michaela Maroney, who was the gold medalist in 2012, is probably the one that you know the best, but also Maddie Larson, Sam Shapiro. So they've coached a lot of great gymnasts. And what I found was twofold. I think that the severity of what they inflicted on their gymnasts stuck out to me because Arthur was allegedly extremely physically abusive to gymnasts. He hit them, he threw them to the ground, just really harrowing things. So that stood out to me. But the other things that stood out to me were that there had been a lot of attempts to report them. A gymnast had gone to Safe Sport, and Safe Sport had said, oh, there's not enough evidence, we're closing the case. There had also been a police case where Arthur was accused of child abuse, and he was allowed to take a diversion, which basically meant no charges ever appeared on the record. And I only found out about this by obtaining the police report and photos of the injuries that he inflicted on an 11-year-old girl when he dragged her by her neck. So that stood out to me. And then the third thing that also stood out was they have never apologized. They have never admitted that they did anything wrong. They've, in fact, blamed and criticized gymnasts for speaking up for them, against them. They've, described themselves as being betrayed and persecuted. So there is no sort of indication from them that they're changing how they approach this or that they feel kind of any regret for how they coached in the past.
Since physical and emotional abuse was really commonplace at their gym, I wanted to talk through one of your sources' stories in more detail. Can you tell me about what happened to Desiree Palomares?
When I talked to her, she told me that when she was 11 years old, Arthur slapped her across the face when he believed she'd spoken back to him. She came home and told her parents, and I spoke to her parents, and they said, we went into the gym, we were really mad, we yelled at Arthur tried to fight us, and then they sent her back to the gym. She also described other types of emotional abuse she went through at AOGC, and one experience she had really stuck out to me, and that was with Galina Marinova, Arthur's co-owner. And what she said happened was that, her parents didn't have a lot of money to go with her to competition. So Galina was basically her guardian. When she was around 11, she brought her to a competition in Texas. And Desiree had kind of a tough competition. She fell, but she made it through her floor routine. And she looks up and looks around for her coach, and her coach is nowhere to be seen. And she waits and she looks around, and nothing, no one's there. Eventually, she figures out her coach has left for the airport and left her there at the gym in Texas.
You said you talked to the parents. Why did they send her back, their tween daughter, back to the gym after she told them about this?
Oh, that's like a really complicated question. I talked to Desiree's father, Renee, and he said he feels horrible now. He has a lot of regrets about how he handled the situation. So I think that's important. But I think that the first thing he said was, we knew she was really good at what she did and we wanted her to get a scholarship to college, which she did do. So for them, that was really important that she'd be able to get this scholarship. He also told me that we raised our kids to be really tough and we thought she was really tough, and she was. So we didn't think it was affecting her the way it turned out that it was affecting her. But I think he had his blinders on. She said, they wanted me to go to the Olympics, and this was the gym that you go to if you want to go to the Olympics.
Mm-hmm. Has anyone formally investigated the conduct of the owners of All Olympia?
Yeah, absolutely. Safe Sport investigated them in 2020. I talked to the woman who made that complaint. Her name's Sydney Frieden. But with the police case, he was entered this basically a diversion program. So there was a hearing, and after the hearing, he didn't face charges, which meant when you look him up, there's no record of this ever happening. And then also Safe Sport, Sydney Frieden said she gave Safe Sport a list of all the gymnasts that she thought would talk. She also gave me that list, and that was part of how I reached out to gymnasts, and I ended up finding a dozen who talked, 10 who alleged physical abuse. But for Sydney, she said Safe Sport came back to her and said they couldn't find enough people to talk and they were going to close the case administratively.
If this gym is so unsafe, why is it still open?
I spoke to some parents whose daughters are either currently competing or left in the last year or so. And they told me they did not believe that the coaches were they said they had not seen physical abuse. Some of them also cast doubt on the allegations that I told them about that had happened in the past. They didn't believe that Arthur had slapped a child. They think their kids are tougher than they are. They think the stakes are higher than they are in reality. Like, there's no higher stake than your kids' mental and emotional health. So I think there's this pattern again and again, not just with All Olympia, but with other gyms as well, where you have parents saying, I know, and I'm going to send my kid there anyway. In fact, one of the current gymnasts on the Olympic team, Henseley Rivera, who's 16, back in 2020, the New York Times did a big investigation into her former coach, Maggie Haney, who had been accused of physical and emotional abuse and actually was banned by USA Gymnastics. And in that article, Henseley Rivera's dad is quoted saying, if I wanted my daughter to come home smiling and happy, I would send her to clown school.
At least 6 coaches of U.S. Olympians and alternates have been investigated by Safe Sport over allegations of abuse, and yet all of them are still coaching. Why is that, and what would make Safe Sport more effective?
I think that there's a lot of answers to that. I think that Safe Sport is underfunded, and they only have some 30, 40 investigators who are working on these cases. And remember, we're talking about the entire Olympic movement, and we're not just talking about elite athletes. We're talking about youth, like a youth soccer coach, theoretically, a youth volleyball coach. So everyone is encompassed. It's a huge mission, and they're handling both sexual and some emotional and physical abuse allegations. So it's a big task, and I think that they've acknowledged that they need more support to do it. They believe a lot of these old cases are difficult to investigate because of how long ago they, happened, and also that there is sort of more nuance and gray area when it comes to emotional abuse allegations. That's what they told me. I will say that in the case of All Olympia, in the case of Arthur Akopian, I did not find a lot of gray area when I looked into what these gymnasts were telling me. I didn't find gray area in slapping a kid in the face, dragging them by their neck. These were things that were, illegal when they happened, and they're, not legal now.
It struck me from talking with you and from reading your stories that gymnastics is the sport that I hear most about when it comes to abuse like this. Is there something particular about this sport that's allowed for this dynamic to continue?
Yeah, I do think that it feels like, again, when we're talking about like factors that need to be present, gymnastics has a lot of them. And there's some other sports that I would say fall into this category, like figure skating would be another one. But there are sports where people for a long time, athletes peak young. So you have really young kids in serious training environments for like hours and hours a day. So that's part of it. I think the, huge risk, the riskiness of the skills that they're performing, the physical danger that they're in, the injuries that they have to go through, all of that, again, like we talked about before, kind of creates this environment where like you have to, your instincts don't matter. Your body is not really yours. You're not in charge of it necessarily. You don't feel like that as a kid. And yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of risk factors there. It's also when you have individual sports, I think that, it can be more difficult because you don't have a team environment where everyone's like supporting each other in the same way that you might with, a team sport.
And you're in competition with the other kids.
Yes.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
What will it take for USA Gymnastics to change?
The reality is they don't have a lot of direct control, or what they will tell me is that they do not have a lot of direct control over what happens in these clubs. The coaches are members of USA Gymnastics. And if a coach isn't a member of USA Gymnastics, then their athletes can't compete. They can't go to the Olympics. So they do have this power to punish coaches, to limit their membership, they can also implement safety plans. Even when Safe Sport have stepped in, USA Gymnastics could say, while Safe Sport is investigating, we've decided that you cannot have unsupervised contact with minor athletes. They have not done that in these prominent cases that I wrote about. So I do think that there's some room for them to kind of take agency in this. And what I found was they were saying, well, Safe Sport, this is Safe Sport's job. Safe Sport needs to handle this. And I wanted to make it clear that, maybe that is true. Maybe Safe Sport is not doing their job. I think a lot of people would allege that. But, there are multiple players in this. There is agency. And I think that I would say the message has not been sent to club coaches that there will be accountability, honestly, not just for what you're doing to gymnasts now, but for what you did to gymnasts in the past. And I think that I talked to a lot of gymnasts who said, yes, I'm worried about this happening to young gymnasts currently, but also I want someone to say that like what happened to you in 2010, 2008, 2005, that was wrong too, and that you can't, say, hit a gymnast in the face and continue to coach kids, even if you're not hitting them anymore.
Thank you, Molly, for coming on What Next?
Thanks for having me.
Molly Henseley Clancy is a national sports reporter for The Washington Post. That's the show. If you're a fan of What Next, the best way to support our work is to join Slate Plus. Go to slate.com/whatnextplus to sign up. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. We're led by Alicia Montgomery, with a little help from Susan Matthews. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary C. Curtis, columnist for Roll Call and host of its Equal Time podcast. Find me on Twitter at mcurtisnc3. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? If you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. Choose from hundreds of social casino style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.